What's up? It's your boy, Slacky J, dropping in on Monday to talk about the fights. Really only the one fight, because bloody hell, this card was bad. We said up front that this card was bad, the matchmaking, but there just was not a lot to care about. Valentina Shevchenko's fighting fighters so bad that they lost to the previous bad fighters that she's already fought. Juan Adams was on the main card. It's just, what? And then Derek Lewis versus Ali Latif was exactly as dull as you would expect that fight to be. But we're going to talk mainly about the main event because that was good, and Dan Ige versus Musa Bektic was good, like we predicted. And then there was some interesting stuff on the undercard. But mainly, let's deal with the misconceptions right up front. Number one, you can't score a split decision by yourself. You are one person. If you scored whatever it is, like 29-28 to someone, that's not a split decision because you gave a round to someone and 2 rounds to another person. It's a split decision if 2 people side one way and 1 person sides the other. It only works with more than 1 person. Feeling conflicted about the result is not a split decision. Secondly, if you ever find yourself using the expression, you have to beat the champ to be the champ, or whatever it is, you're an idiot. That expression is not a rules criteria. It was made up by boxing coaches and fans to be like, yeah, sorry you didn't win, but if it's a close fight, idiot judges are going to side with the guy they know. Another one I heard this week was, doesn't matter how strong you start, it's how you finish. No, the last rounds do not mean more than the first rounds. But really, it's going to be an episode where we moan about judges anyway, because the judging was all over the shop in this one. Do we reward takedowns? Do we not reward takedowns? Does it mean a lot that John Jones finally got Dominick Reyes down in round 4 or whatever it was, and Dominick Reyes immediately got up? Does that mean more than when Ali Latif was laying on top of Derek Lewis for most of a round? To the judges, clearly it did. But before we get into all that, let's just say, firstly, I can't imagine not working in this business and paying for that card. I'd have been furious. But if you did pay for that card and you watched the main event, it was pretty great. I thought John Jones did what John Jones does, and did very well under not great circumstances because he was losing the first few rounds. And Dominick Reyes did well because, a lot of people didn't expect much from him at all. I wrote a piece being like, yeah, he's got a good shot in this one. And people were like, oh yeah, it's like just playing up this obvious mismatch to make it look better. And I'm like, no, I genuinely think he's a very interesting matchup for John Jones. I gave him much more of a chance than I gave Thiago Santos, and I was completely wrong about Thiago Santos. But Dominick Reyes had a lot of things going for him that were really compelling in a matchup against John Jones. Firstly, good kicker, great low kicks, good movement, good punching power, good on the counter. Good at drawing people into boxing exchanges, even if they don't want to get into boxing exchanges, which is, a John Jones thing, doesn't like boxing. And had been very, very hard to take down up until that point. The real question mark was that Volkan Oezdemir fight, because Volkan Oezdemir mixed it up so well and really gave Dominick Reyes a handful. But brilliant performance, I thought. And we said it last week, I said, he's more like Jones's stature, and he's got a near 80-inch reach, but he's still giving up half a foot of reach. Crazy to be 6'4" and giving up half a foot of reach to someone your own height. But yeah, we talked about it. The Mirko Krokop stuff, left round kick and left straight, those were good. Jab to the body was there, which was surprising. Left body straights, lovely stuff. He was having a hard time getting to Jones's head with his left straight because Jones, he will frame with his lead hand, fold with his rear hand, duck down. He's doing everything to get away from the punch. And it is very hard to go through. It's not textbook boxing, but it is very difficult to deal with. There was a great moment in round 1 where Jones was kicking and Reyes hit him with a left straight. It was a left body straight, but I think he caught him just under the pec or something. Didn't quite catch the solar plexus. But he knocked him off his feet because if you hit someone in their center of balance when they're on one leg, you're going to knock them off their feet. And either Rogan or Dom Cruz was like, oh, he's been wobbled. And you're like, what? You don't get wobbled by a shot to the pec. But anyway, yeah, no, there was some nice stuff in this fight from the Gustafsson fight, I thought, because I said in my Unibet article, which you should read, I said there's some really key differences between Gustafsson and Reyes, even though they're bringing in similar statures and builds to this fight. And that was part of what was interesting about the Jones-Gustafsson matchup. Jones wasn't going to be dwarfing this guy. He wasn't going to have he's going to have a reach advantage, but not as big as usual. And the guy's not going to be swinging up at him. But having said that, Kraus came out, used his movement really well, and you saw again what Gustafsson did in that first fight, Reyes was able to do in the second fight. When you're moving laterally a lot, you don't have to be constant, but as long as you're doing it a lot and almost constant, makes it very, very tricky to get a lead on the position of the knee, the lead knee, because the lead knee is what Jones is going on. If you're Vitor Belfort or Rampage Jackson and you're going straight at him, or in the Gustafsson rematch where he's moving around the ring and he's drawing Gustafsson towards him on a straight line, you know exactly where their foot's going down, so you can just stamp on it, stamp on that lead knee. But if they're floating around you, it's very, very hard to step on their lead knee. And you saw a good few of these times he missed and ended up out of position. And that was how he got taken down by Gustafsson in the first fight. Reyes managed to get some punches in on him as a result. But perfect use of what Gustafsson had been doing so well. And it was again because Jones wanted to be the aggressor, which is interesting because we said coming into this one, I said I expect more of what he did against Gustafsson and Cormier the second time against both of them, which was going backwards around the cage, leading them forwards and kicking them. And he didn't do that. He went forwards and tried to push into Reyes. But he did drive a nice pace, and obviously you saw that affecting Reyes in the fourth and fifth rounds. But he looked knackered from the second round. And I think a lot of that is that awful hair. Because he's balding, but he doesn't want to accept he's balding. So he's got this weird comb over. And when he starts sweating, it just sticks to his head. It's almost Bobby Charlton-esque, but it's not quite flapping in the wind. And I really think that stuff affects judges. If you look like shit, people are going to go, wow, he looks awful. He must be really tired. And that was even the second and third round. But yeah, Reyes, cool, calm, collected under fire, moving well, kept up that for a good portion of the fight. 20 of the 25 minutes, I would say he was moving really well. And then the last 5 minutes, he looked a bit worse for wear. But, it's interesting because all that bollocks about being an athlete. And I was going, wasn't your sport American football? Don't they stop every 15 seconds? When you say athlete over here, people think football player, soccer player, rugby player, stuff where you're actually doing an endurance thing. It was being I'm an athlete as an American footballer. It's kind of like saying, well, he's not met anyone who's really explosive or can lift the 220 for however many reps it is or whatever. Which you have if you're fighting in the light heavyweight division. You've met plenty of people who are explosive. But no, Dominick Reyes did a great job of being an actual professional, and this is something that's really sorely missing in the upper divisions. Coming in and doing your fucking job, being in shape to do what you're going to do for a good amount of rounds. I can forgive people for getting tired in round 4 and round 5. It's a grueling thing to have to fight 25 minutes. But if you're tired by round 2 or 3, you're not doing your fucking job. Shout out to Claudia Gadelia for being the worst offender of this through her entire career. Now, what you saw as the fight went on was that Jones's reachy, checky, handy stuff really was starting to bother Reyes, and it was making it very difficult for him to get shots through. You saw him land a lot of shots, but not a lot of good ones to the head. He was really getting the body more effectively, because Jones is all in on head defense and on pushing you away. But by the 4th and 5th, he's getting tired, and that sort of checking hands harassment was really bothering him. And he starts doing the old Mendoza, 17, 1800s, chopping at the opponent's hands with your wrists and fists. He's trying to swat Jones's hands for, it was probably about half a minute in the 4th or 5th he was doing that. It was quite funny. But one of the things that let's talk about stuff that, well, firstly, let's talk about the decision, because obviously that's the most controversial bit. I'll admit I think it was 3 rounds to 2 for Reyes. I'm not going to get too bogged down in who scored for what. I think the one we're all upset about is 4 rounds to 1 for Jones, because that's absurd. If you saw rounds 1, 2, and 3, if you saw rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you couldn't see something for Reyes, if you saw the whole fight and you couldn't see 2 rounds for Reyes, you don't really know what you're watching. You don't want to go too much into significant strikes landed, because that's information you don't have access to on the spot. But that's just tabulated by someone pressing buttons on a laptop from ringside. It's not magic. They don't have anything in the gloves sensing that. They were talking about doing that, but I don't think they ever did. We'll all wear laser tag vests, but or those lame-ass suits that they wear in the Olympic fencing. Or taekwondo. And that led to people using the rabbit kick, which is like a heel to the kidney, to try and score points on the electronic chest protector things. But you can watch a fight and get a good sense of what's landing and what's not. And if you have experience, you can do that without like freaking out when the crowd cheers. There were moments like there were a couple during that Kraus Giles fight. Was it Trevon Giles? The Kraus fight where Kraus went to the fence and he didn't actually get hit very hard. Well, he did once, but like a couple of times he went to the fence, didn't get hit very hard, but was covering up, and the other guy was pouring it on. And the crowd were going nuts like Kraus was hurt, but he wasn't. You can tell that if you're decent at watching a fight. And these judges clearly aren't. You can't see when someone is outlanding someone else. But then we get into like octagon control, and if you're moving forwards, you're winning. Which was the old Nick Diaz thing. I said it very famously, well, not famously, but famously with people who read my shit. After the Carlos Condit Nick Diaz fight, if you're moving forward constantly but not doing anything about the strikes and not landing your own strikes, the only thing you're really dictating is not the pace, but the pace at which you lose. You're just dictating the pace at which you get hit. And that's what Jones was doing for one and two at least, most of 3, parts of 4, Wore it well, obviously, looked to be in great condition, took the body shots wonderfully, but wasn't landing and was getting landed on more than he was landing. I think it's also very interesting what you consider of the grappling, because I really thought, and I said this in my pre-fight, I thought that we'd see Jones use the duck in on the hips or the level change entry to get the clinch, push to the fence, and then free himself up to hit effectively, or just, tire Reyes out from there. But he really wasn't able to do that very effectively. He was getting hold of the clinch, and then he was doing what he was doing to Gustafsson in the first fight, diving after that inside trip. And if you're looking for the inside trip, it means that you're fine to be in the guard, which we know Jones is. He likes to work with elbows from the closed guard. He prefers that to like passing. But it does mean that you want to get the guy down. You really want to get the guy down, and you're not too worried about improving your position and shit. And he was doing that and landing on his knees and having to come up from there and stuff. And when he did get Reyes down along the fence, Reyes immediately popped up. And that was as much to do with conditioning as anything else. Like, you've seen him. I think of John Jones versus Rampage Jackson. And this is before Rampage was embarrassingly out of shape. He was still not keen on working his cardio. But Rampage stopped all his takedowns rounds 1 and 2. Takes some, just, ground down by kicks to the knees, kicks to the body. And then by round 4, Jones is able to take him down effortlessly. Or at least make it look effortless. It's not effortless. But so for Reyes to be able to do that so late in the fight, obviously very impressive. But let's talk about, having understood that I thought Reyes edged it, but I'm happy for Jones to have edged it, but I'm mad about that 4-1 scorecard. Having said all that, I'd love to see the rematch. Already people were doing like that, well, he'll lose the rematch worse. And you're like, there's nothing I hate more than people being like, don't need to see that match because it's played out in my head already. It's like Prime Anderson Silva. Well, who's he going to fight? And you go, I don't know, one of the guys ranked in the division. And they're like, well, he'd win. So what's the point? But obviously a lot of people have asked me about the rematch, and I've given a lot of thought to the rematch already. And, I wouldn't feel comfortable picking Reyes in the rematch because, John Jones has been so strong in both of the high-profile rematches he's had. He just came in with much better game plans. Not completely different, well, completely different than the Gustafsson one, but the Cormier one just adjusted the game plan, took all the established knowledge, took the confidence he'd built through 5 rounds with Cormier, and just built on it, and that's really impressive. There are guys like that who just, once they know they're a bit jittery the first, well, not jittery, but they're not as confident the first time they meet someone. Once they've seen everything that guy can do, they're like, okay, let's do the rematch, and they're just 100% a better fighter. However, if I was talking for Reyes in the rematch, I think some of the things that he could have got to more, body kicks especially. He had some really good success with body kicks in this fight, but he only landed about 5 or 6. He threw like 7, but he landed 5 or 6. Because Jones's elbows, because he's so keen to push his man away, to frame on them, to fold down behind his right arm as well. If you watch his elbows, they're very often away from his body, and that's when you can sneak that body kick in. And, a good body kick is you can be one and done. But if you get a guy that can, that's significantly out of position and you hit him with a good body kick, you've got a great chance of not getting taken down. Because basically you're hoping that you're worrying about the guy getting punted in the ribs with his ribs completely exposed, and then draping himself over you and taking you down. If you kick them properly, and their elbows are away from their ribs, you will take some of the air out of them, and it will make it a lot easier. Watch, and I'm going to say this too, like knees to the body. Reyes landed one good stepping left knee to the body, and it was really nice. If you remember Lyoto Machida, he had great success with the left knee to the body, and he did it to wrestlers especially. And now the knee to the body, you'd think you're giving him the single leg, he's going to bundle you over. But he was doing it to guys like Phil Davis, and he'd hit him with the knee, and the knee would give him a little bump and take a little bit of air out of them while he dug the underhook on the same side as he put his leg back. So he ended up in like an over-under clinch. But if you're like Reyes was in this fight, every time they hit the clinch, Reyes' head was in front of Jones's, and he was bumping with his lead shoulder, putting his other hand inside the bicep, pushing off immediately. It looked like Jones was the one struggling to hold on. So for the rematch, I would say more body kicks, more knees to the body, because that's the stuff that will slow people down. And I've talked about this. The left straight to the body was working really well for him, and I talked about this last time. And I talk about this a lot generally, but the straight to the body is, I think people see it as like a stocky man punch, because so many of like the short knack Muay, the tanky people do it. KOSI Galaxy, who's one of the greatest knockout artists in boxing history, he came from Muay Thai. He was a Thai guy, and he was famous for his left straight to the body as a southpaw, but he was built like he was wider than he was tall. And I think a lot of people see it as that sort of guy's technique, but you see guys like Badr Hari and Ioanni Jacek, people who are long and gangly at their weight, doing well with it too. Not only that, but people think of it as like an offensive technique, and it can be, but also like Gene Tunney considered the right straight to the body the lifesaver against Jack Dempsey. If someone's coming in on you and you hit them in the solar plexus, you can really change their mind about closing in on you. So the left straight to the body worked well for Reyes here. But if he was doing it with knees, man, I think that'd be fantastic. And then, there were a lot of changes of direction in this fight. It wasn't just Jones walking forward the whole time. Sometimes Jones would go onto the back foot and Reyes would have to go forward. And he did a great job of balancing the two and working off both. But I think when he's going forward, front kicks to the body. I don't think I saw one front kick from Dominick Reyes in this fight, and I don't think I've seen them generally from Dominick Reyes. There was a great one on the undercard. Who was it? It was that Ewell fight. Martinez, was it his name? Hit Ewell with a beautiful front snap kick off his back leg. Winded him twice, in the first and in the second, I think. But yeah, amazing kick, and works especially well because when you're just throwing left round kicks, body and head, the guy will get in the habit of, like, I've just got to make this barrier here. And you can sink the left straight down the centre of the head, but that's the known part of the double attack. If you add in the left front kick to the body as well, you can really mess his day up by going inside the elbow when he's ready for the body kicks, and then turning it over, just doing a little Brazilian kick, which obviously Jones loves. But that will really help. So front kicks, more kicks to the body, and knees. And the other one that I really noticed in this fight was, and I think we talked about this up front too, but Reyes likes low kicking from that southpaw stance. He throws his left leg to the opponent's lead leg, so inside low kick. Now that can be a real bastard of a kick. If you're taking, because the inside of your thigh generally a lot less conditioned than the outside of your thigh, because you'll normally be matched if you're a orthodox fighter anyway, but because you'll be matched up against orthodox fighters and they'll be kicking to the outside of your thigh most of the time. But also, you're going to the more sensitive part of your thigh naturally with your power kick. But it's sort of like when guys fight open stance, so southpaw to orthodox, you'll notice both guys turning their lead leg in a lot more. They won't be standing ready to turn it out into the kick. And Jones was standing like that a lot too in this fight. And he was landing his left hook really well, I thought, and his jab. I thought his boxing looked sharper than usual in this fight, but the left hook especially. But, if they have the lead foot turned in slightly and you're throwing kicks into into their inner leg, it's very easy for them to check. And there were a lot of instances where Reyes was kicking straight into his check. There was a really nasty one in round 2 where his toes just like slapped off Jones's knee. And you're looking at it going, you came within inches of basically ruining your foot for the rest of the fight there, mate. So what I really would love to see him work on for the rematch is kicking with the right leg. He barely ever kicks with his right leg, and partly that is because if you're kicking with your right leg as a southpaw, you're kicking into the closed side. So all the upper body stuff, you're going to hit the back and the meat of the body and the shoulder, and you're not going to be able to catch the head unless you're really slick with it. But kicking into the closed side of the lead leg is good. So step up low kicks into the thigh, buckling the knee inwards, and the two to look at for that. Jerome Labana made a career out of being a right-handed southpaw, and he would step up into his right low kicks and just crunch guys' knees inward with his round kick into the thigh. He was awesome at that, and he would use it to set up the left overhand. So if you watch his fight with Francisco Filo, he knocks him out with the with the right low kick into the left overhand. Mike Bernardo, he crumpled with right low kicks. But, those are the ones to watch for that. And then in the UFC in recent years, Arnold Allen has had you remember Arnold Allen lost to Mads Bennell? No. Arnold Allen has had real success with a southpaw right low kick, but step up kick below the knee. He goes into the calf, and he can get some serious pop on it. And if you trained Reyes to work those two kicks, I think he'd have a wonderful time in a rematch with Jones, just kicking that lead leg inwards. Plus, obviously, if you're kicking the lead leg inwards, great chance of knocking them off balance and creating openings for your left hand, because the left hand was the thing he was struggling to get through to the head anyway. And of course, if you're feeling real slick, you can go outside low kick, so right low kick to the lead leg, and then left high kick afterwards. And he was looking for the left high kick all fight. But if you knock a guy's leg out of line first, you've got a much better chance, because if you knock someone off balance, their hands drop from their guard. It just happens. That's what happens because you're human. So some cool stuff to work on for him there. What else was good on this card? Really limited on my responses here because there really wasn't a lot. I mean, Valentina fought a girl who lost to the last useless girl she fought, and then declared at the end she wants to fight someone who just lost to this useless girl that she fought. All while being like, Weili Zhang, not ready for a title shot yet. Oh, such a shitty division. We don't even, there is no division. If 3 fights into your career at that weight, you've cleared out the division, we didn't need the division in the first place. Justin Taffer versus Juan Adams. A lot of people want me to talk about this because Justin Taffer looks a bit like Mark Hunt and knocked a guy out with he's like a southpaw Mark Hunt, knocked him out with a right hook. But just why was this on the main card? It was shite. And Juan Adams is dreadful. They were talking about him being a strong wrestler, and I watched him fight Arjun Buller and do nothing. I watched him fight Greg Hardy and get stuck under the first sprawl that Greg Hardy did. And then I watched him fight Justin Taffer and reach for a takedown and fail. I really hope this guy's cut because he's bad. Dan Ige versus Mirsad Bektik was good fun, and Dan Ige's striking looked sharp as fuck. Now, the problem that Dan Ige's had is that he gasses out fairly regularly, but he actually looked really good through the rounds here. There was a really nice moment in the first round, I think, or the second round. Double jabbed towards the fence, and as I said last week, he only really started jabbing in the last round of his last fight for some reason. But he double jabbed in, threw a wide right to the body and then a left hook to the body afterwards as Mirsad Bektik hit the fence. It was beautiful. Bektik looked all kinds of confused on his feet. This guy used to be terrifying, and now he just seems like, he's still very, very strong and very good on top, but he's just not nearly as scary now. He did get top position, and he was doing all that stuff we were talking about. If you haven't watched the new Filthy Casuals guide, we talked about his fight with Ricardo Lamas and how Ricardo Lamas used his weird get the fuck up guard in that fight. But you saw Mirsad Bektik doing the same stuff here, trying to open the elbow, put his head in, squeeze for the arm triangle, or move for the arm triangle. Very nearly got the arm triangle from Mount. Dan Ige's bottom game looked slick, got a Kimura grip from half guard and used the butterfly hook to attempt a butterfly sweep from there, but hit the fence. Again, we were talking about sweeps in the Filthy Casuals guide. Some great clips of Mansour Barnoui moving himself off the fence just far enough that he can sweep the opponent into the space along the fence. Very cool. But yeah, I thought this was a great little fight, Ige versus Bektik. If you haven't seen any fights from this night and you want to know what to watch, that's the one. Derek Lewis versus Ali Latif was bad. There are people who like Derek Lewis, but it's mainly like most of his fights are just a dude who's not in shape, jumping into flying kicks and then complaining that he's put his back out when he gasses out. Won the decision, but spent a lot of time on the bottom. But again, Ali Latif on top did nothing. And Ali Latif, who used to be comfortable swinging hands and was very powerful, just looked in his last couple, has looked completely terrified. I think Volkan Oezdemir knocking him out that time has done a number on his confidence. Trevon Giles versus James Kraus was good fun. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was about as fun as it gets on this card. Lauren Murphy versus Andrea Lee was dire. Andre Ewell versus Jonathan Martinez was good fun. Very strange that Ewell got the decision because 2 of the rounds he spent about a minute on the fence, like crumpled over because he'd been hit in the body and trying to weave out of the way of strikes as Martinez poured it on. I thought Martinez looked really good. I thought Ewell looked fun, actually. I thought he did some fun stuff, but then I remember him being fun against Barao. But Martinez must have watched his last fight against Marlon Vera because Vera put the pressure on Ewell and melted him, beat him up. And Martinez tried to do the same thing, a little bit slower, a little bit lazier, but he still did well doing it. And the front kick to the body was money, as we said. Yusuf Zalal versus Austin Lingo was bizarre because Zalal was moving well, but every time he circled off the fence, he did it with his hands down, and every time Austin Lingo came in with a jab and then a left hook to follow, he caught Zalal right on the chin. And it didn't have much pop on it because he wasn't very good at doing the jabbing off the hook. It's a very weird motion. It's not natural at all. But he did jar Zalal, and Zalal would freak out a little bit. However, Lingo threw no kicks, no low kicks, no high kicks, no body kicks, nothing to punish Zalal as he circled out, and just kept following after him. It was a really weird fight. And Mario Batista knocked out Miles Johns in a fight where nothing happened for 6 minutes and then he kneed him in the face. So, that was it. That was the weekend of fights. It was kind of shit, to be honest. Can only hope the next weeks are better. We really did. It really hurt this card that we lost Jimmy Rivera versus Marlon Vera because that is such a good fight. Could have really done with that. Anyway, let's do a quick question and then we'll get out of here and be back to talk about the upcoming fights later in the week. My boy Lucas says, what's good, Slack? Big fan and all that. Got 2 questions. How do you fight a longer opponent? And how late is too late to start fighting? Longer opponents, generally there are 2 ways to do it. You try and crowd in on them, or you try and take a step back and make them overreach. So crowding in on them, fairly self-explanatory. You either check their hands or move your head and slip inside something, and you get inside their reach, and you open up with your hands in a space where they'll have to awkwardly crumple their punches or swing round, and you can throw straight punches. The sweet spot is if they've got a half-foot reach advantage on you, which is a lot. I'm giving an extreme example here, but the sweet spot would be with you're landing your perfect right, straight, and left hook, and they're all crumpled up trying to trade back. Lots of guys nowadays reaching, like John Jones, Israel Adesanya, stuff like that. So body kicks, really good, because obviously your leg, longer than your arm, comes out of your hip, has a good chance of cracking them in the body if they're reaching and pushing off you. But closing from range, making them give up their reach is another good one. Actually, one way to close is to stand out of range, and this is where the 2 strategies overlap. Stand out of range, wait for kicks, and close on the kicks. Because you can stand far enough away from anyone that you can make it hard for them to punch you and they'll try and kick you instead a lot of the time. And then you can check the kick, step in, or you can step in on the kick with the right hand. That's a really good strategy for closing. If you close on kicks, it works really well because the opponent is on one leg and you're on both feet. And while people are getting good at people have always been getting good at bringing their kicking leg back down as fast as possible and getting back to stance, that is still a good head start you've got. If you block a kick, you know that you're on the end of their leg, so you're close enough that you can close and try and hit them, and they've got to get their leg back down before they can do anything about it. And then getting them to give up their reach is taking a step back, making them lunge for a jab at you and trying to move in on them when they do it. So duck the jab, slip the jab, whatever, return with counters. And that links in with what we were talking about last week, countering the step instead of the hands. You make them step to you. You know that when they step to you, they're going to jab or throw their right hand or whatever, and then you move in. Regarding starting fighting, I want to be that guy who's you can always start fighting. I would say to anyone considering taking up a martial art, you can always start a martial art, even a combat sport. Something like kickboxing, boxing, you can still take it up. You just won't. It is very much a young man's game, the competitive stuff. And by young man's game, I mean under 40. Unless you're really good and you've been doing it a long time and you're 40 and you're, an old wizard, then it's very much a young man's game. jiu-jitsu and things, judo, stuff like that, they're pretty good. They've got masters divisions and stuff that you can compete in. I don't think kickboxing tends to have like masters divisions. I've certainly not seen any, but they're pretty good for letting you compete in with people your own age. And there are some fucking monsters out there in masters divisions. Josh Hinger, who competes with the best guys in the world in the normal divisions, is technically in the masters divisions because he's an older guy. But yeah, you can take up grappling sports at any time in your life and get good at them. When you get into like 70, 80, obviously a bit more complicated. But I think people think that it's too late a lot more than they should. It's like, why would I try that? I should have started that when I was 8 and then I'd be a world champion by now. Just like, you're allowed to do things because you enjoy them. And if you're not going to enjoy it, if you think you're going to hate fighting, unless you're like, life brings you into situations where you might have to fist fight at some point, don't bother. If you think you might enjoy it, don't worry about being a world champion. Like, there is a very small subsection of people who need to worry about that sort of stuff, and that's young men who are already in fighting or have found that they're good at fighting and could make more money doing that or have more chance of becoming a world champion than what they're doing as a career now. That being said, if you start like boxing as a 35-year-old or whatever, be very careful, or MMA even, be very careful, because if you take an amateur or professional fight, you might be fed to some like young 22-year-old who's just a monster. They're going to use you to build them up. So you've got to be careful with this stuff. And I always say, like, you'll hear me disparaging the amateur game a lot on this podcast, because I think that young men who can fight should be doing it for, get paid, because even if it's like $100, $50, whatever, get paid rather than doing it for free. Because nobody except Scott Coker gives a fuck about your... Well, not even Scott Coker. Only Teach the Junk pretends to give a shit about your amateur record. No one cares about it. Get whatever rounds you need to get in as an amateur or whatever. Go professional as soon as possible. Try and capitalize on that if you're a young man trying to go pro at some point. But if you're doing something recreationally and you just have the desire to compete, and you're maybe an older guy and you have no intention to make a career out of this or anything, you just want to get a good competitive scrap in just to say you have at some point, by all means do an amateur fight. I would just say be very, very careful, because it's like, as bad as the regional MMA circuit is professionally, it's double bad amateur-wise. But yes, how old is too old to start fighting? Fighting, I would say like 40. To take up combat sports, to spar actively, to get great joy and self-improvement out of them, probably not until like you're at the point where stuff is starting to ache on its own, 70, 80. Enjoy your body, do what you want to do and what you think you can do. And if you take it up and you don't enjoy it, give it a few goes, because obviously like sparring, rolling, things like that, they're scary the first time you do them. But if you're going in week out and you're not enjoying it, move on with your life. There's no need to be to make yourself fight if you don't want to. Is that a weird note to end this podcast on? Might be, but anyway, I'm going to head out because Storm Kiara, or whatever it is coming in and shaking all the windows. And we'll be back later in the week to talk about the upcoming fights, which include opening schedule, Anderson versus Blachowicz. Oh, fuck my ass. That's terrible. Oh my god, Diego Sanchez versus Michelle Pereira. Okay, well, we'll try. We'll try and talk about those fights later in the week. If you want to join up to the Patreon, next big piece dropping is going to be Advanced Striking 2.0 Anderson Silva. Going to be a big one. If you didn't read the previous one on Badr Hari, thousands of words, tons of diagrams by yours truly. I had a lot of fun writing it. It's really deep conceptual stuff. And, if you like the art of people hitting each other in the head, it's right up your street. So sign up to the Patreon, help support the podcast. If you haven't watched the new Filthy Casuals guide, go watch it. It's all about guard games and who is having weird success from the bottom in MMA. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack, and no one's beaten Valentina Shevchenko until they've spent significant time in the third world. Cheers!